This week on Motor Week, how the Mercedes A-Class is now fully elk-proof. Is the new M10 a noble drive? But first, we take to the roads in the 1998 European Car of the Year.
Now, every year, Europe's motoring journalists get together to vote on their Car of the Year. And in the past, they've come up with some, quite frankly, amazing decisions. In 1979, the Chrysler Horizon was voted top car. And in 1975, the Simca came out on top. Even last year, there was controversy when the Renault Megane Scenic was voted top car over the likes of the Jaguar XK8, the Porsche Boxster, the 5 Series and the SLK. Well, this year, they've come up with a cracking decision, and it's this, the brand new Alfa Romeo 156. And this is our first chance here in Spain to look at and drive the Car of the Year. What the designers of the 156 have come up with here is a saloon that almost looks like a coupe. A quick first glance and you think, well, are there any rear doors on it? And how do you open them? Well, there are, and the handles are here. How about that for a neat idea? Absolutely fantastic. And there are pin-sharp spotlights recessed into the front spoiler as well, which give a fantastic beam. And also these alloy wheels remind me of the telephone dial alloys that we saw on the Porsche 928 many years ago. What Alfa Romeo have done here with the 156 is go head-to-head against BMW's 3 Series, and they've come up with a winner against the current 3 Series shape. Now, whether that remains to be seen after the new 3 Series arrives this summer, well, we'll have to wait and see. The engines in the Alfa range are real beauties, they're absolute goers. They get a choice of 3, a 1.8 litre and 2 litre, the twin-spark 4 cylinders, and the 2.5 litre V6. The car I'm in at the moment is the 2 litre twin-spark, and it's an absolute beauty. But if you're a real fan of that 2.5, the V6 engine note, then that must be the car for you. That's a fantastic view of the Costa del Sol, and how about this for a drop-dead gorgeous shape? This car would not be seen out of place on the catwalks of a top Italian fashion house. Now, the design of the 156 was in-house, led by Walter de Silva and his team, and what they've come up with here is a beautifully shaped car. The curves and everything about it just looks fantastic. It's a touch of modernism with some grace and some elegancy as well. And this shield on the front is absolutely fantastic. You want to pull it off, strap it onto your arm and go into battle. It's very reminiscent of some of Alfa's great pre-war cars. Now, Alfa have decided to price the 156 very aggressively. The 1.8 litre twin spark starts at £17,500, the 2 litre at just under 20, and £22,500 for the 2.5 litre V6. Every car comes with a reasonable specification, including a sunroof, steel wheels, electric windows and an alarm immobiliser. But the options list is also fairly long, and you do have to pay for extras like air conditioning on the 1.8 litre. The suspension is supple rather than firm, and in my opinion the steering could be with being a little bit more precise. There's a tendency to oversteer on some tight corners. Now, the 156 is based rather loosely on its Italian cousin the Fiat Bravo, although it's much modified from that. It has a wishbone front suspension and a lengthened wheelbase to accommodate the 2.5 litre V6. Now, Peter, how important do you think it was to win the Car of the Year for the 156?
We were absolutely delighted, very honoured to win it. We do take Car of the Year as a very serious and important accolade, and obviously it has a knock-on effect on potential customers, because they can see that from that it's not just their opinion, but their opinion is backed up by people who are really in the know. So yes, it was an important point for us, and the fact that Alfa Romeo has never won it before just added to the icing, should we say.
And for a non-mainstream car, it's really quite an achievement. Or would you say really that the 156 is the most mainstream Alfa ever?
Well, this begs the question: what is a mainstream car, doesn't it? In terms of mass manufacturers, obviously Alfa Romeo and its models will always remain a niche brand, with very sporting overtones, sporting elegance, and so on. But I would have to agree with you that 156 has been designed to be built in comparatively large numbers by Alfa Romeo standards. And I would emphasise by Alfa Romeo standards. I mean, the factory is currently gearing up to build 156 at a rate of over 100,000 per annum. Now, that's not very much by mainstream manufacturer standards, but by Alfa standards, yes, that's a considerable volume.
What about the concern that some people have with the amount of Alfa dealerships around the country? Is that something that's going to be addressed?
Well, to some extent, it actually has been addressed already, and we're continuing to work on that. We have something like 85 Alfa Romeo dealers throughout the UK at the moment, and this has risen consistently over the last 3 years from a very low base of around 40. So we've more or less doubled the size of the Alfa Romeo dealer network in 3 years.
Now, the interior in the 156 perhaps takes a little bit of getting used to. The sports seats in this particular model are very supportive, and you get this extra cushion for the thighs as well, which is easy just to move in and out. One thing I don't like is this carbon fibre look around the centre console here. It is very cheap and plasticky. You can have the option of wood, but it's a similar sort of look, to be honest. The binnacles for the speedometer and the rev counter, those are rather quaint, but this ventilation system here looks like it was stuck on as an afterthought. Now, there's no doubt that Alfa Romeo have had its problems in the past few years. They've been through some lean times, and there's perhaps a perception, particularly in Britain, that finding a new Alfa Romeo and getting it serviced regularly is a problem. That's not the case. There are plenty of dealers around the UK for you to go to. But what Alfa Romeo have come up here with a new 156, and remember, European Car of the Year, it's a car that's going to take on those German competitors with ease and keep the Alfa flag flying for many years to come.
The Mercedes A-Class. Good news and bad news. The good news is that Mercedes wheeled out some of the revised A-Class vehicles and they all passed this infamous elk test, even with Niki Lauda doing his best to turn it over. The bad news is that for us here in the UK, we'll have to wait even longer before we can get to see them in the showrooms. Here's what Mercedes have done to improve the groundbreaking dual-floor A-Class since that fateful overturning accident at only 37 miles an hour. Lower profile tyres have now been specified. ESP, the Electronic Stability Programme, is now standard and will be retrofitted to all cars which are on the roads of Europe now. The ride height has been lowered by 3.5 centimetres to bring down the centre of gravity, and the track of the A-Class has been widened by 2.4 centimetres. The springs and dampers have been re-specified, and the anti-roll bars have been stiffened. We're looking at, in theory, a much more stable, sharper drive with much more adhesion. The A-Class is revolutionary because it uses a sandwich floor, useful, like in the Renault Scenic, for providing cubby holes, but much more importantly here, for giving space to the A-Class's mechanics, so allowing more passenger cabin area. The interior is about as big as the Mondeo, although the whole car is actually shorter than a Fiesta. Mercedes dealers in the UK have a huge and frustrating problem in that they have lists of customers desperate to own a new Mercedes A-Class. It's going to be at least autumn or later until we get some right-hand drivers on the production line and on sale in the UK for around 14.5 grand. Also, you don't need a degree in automotive finances to work out that with the recalls, extra equipment and re-engineering on the revised A-Class, profit margins will have to be cut all round. So what are the extraordinary Smart Car, the joint Mercedes project which shares the A-Class's sandwich concept? Once bitten, twice shy, the Smart's launch has been delayed for no doubt extreme testing and tweaking. The winners of all this is of course us, since we eventually will end up with a far better, tested product. Keep watching Motor Week for more news of these frontier-busting models. After the break, chalk and cheese, the Noble M10 and the Ford Galaxy MPV on Motor Week. Here on Motor Week we film a report about a vehicle after we've driven it for about a week or so, but of course that's a little unfair because most of us, when we buy a car, we own it for at least a year. So that's why we do long-term tests. It's interesting with long-term tests because little niggles you had when you first had the car suddenly become unimportant. And things you really liked about a car are nice, but maybe aren't that important after a while. We've had the Ford Galaxy Gear X 2.3 for about 4 months now. It's really strange, when we first got the Galaxy, none of us really liked the seats. They were much too firm, and I thought, oh, horrible things. But actually on a long journey, they really do support your back extremely well. And we don't mind the high up position. This vast amount of plastic that all of us balked at first of all is actually quite acceptable. The A-pillar could be a little bit thinner, but I guess it's there for structure. And it's a shame that this little panel here hasn't got some rubberized bits in it, because things that you do put on there, like maps or things, just fall off every corner you go around. Ford, please put a rubberized mat in there. And there's another thing, Ford, we want to tell you. The one thing that we're all agreed on that annoys us to bits about the Galaxy, the stubby switchgear. This plastic is smooth, they've curved it, your fingers cannot get a grip on it, and what's more, the radio and CD control is just too close to the indicator control. All of us have quite often, and even after driving the thing for quite a few miles, you still go for the wrong one. Often I've wanted to indicate left and you just go for something on the left and you turn the CD down instead. It's not good enough. Please, Ford, make them a little bit longer, a little bit more matte so we can get a decent grip on it, and put this somewhere else or put it on the steering wheel. We have recently taken the Galaxy for a service at a main dealer, and we expected the worst, having heavy duty use by a film crew, but there were no problems.
They're designed to do a lot of mileage. Fords are now designed to do 100,000 miles easily, with no major problems, and we found generally they don't have any major problems.
So what have you done? We've gone over 12,000 miles. What did you do today?
Changed the oil in it, checked the filter, air filter, pollen filter, lights, levels, tyres, brakes, and basically the car was okay. Most car servicing these days is about £55–60 for a 10,000 mile service.
Now that's cheaper than it used to be some years ago. Why has the cost gone down?
They've become better.
One of the great advantages of the Galaxy we've really appreciated is getting out of a tight squeeze. There's been quite a lot of criticism about this particular model of not being able to see well out the back, which is true. We've had a few bumps and scrapes, sorry Ford, but I tell you, getting out of a car park space isn't as bad as it first seems. With such a big vehicle, you think, oh my God, but the turning circle is great. It's as good as a black cab, I tell you. All of us who have driven the Galaxy have really appreciated the smooth engine, and it really is. This is the 2.3 litre, which replaced the 2 litre, although saying that, they still do have it for sale for the same price. You'd be daft to have the 2 litre, because this new one, even though it's a little less frugal, is certainly much better in the power delivery department, much smoother, and certainly quieter at motorway speeds. In the last 4 months of ownership, we've had no mechanical problems whatsoever with the Ford Galaxy 2.3 Gear X. We did have a flat tyre, not the car's fault of course, but an interesting problem did rear its head. Now, these vehicles are probably the heaviest vehicles on the road that have alloys on. You don't have alloys on vans, do you? A heavy vehicle means you've got to have decent brakes, which this does, thankfully. Those brakes heat up. Now, we tried to get this wheel off. Boy, was it a problem. We got all the nuts off, we followed the book exactly, we just could not shift the thing because, as you know, an alloy wheel has to be put on pretty snug, and it had almost welded itself on. We did have to get the man from the tyre centre up to give us a hand, but this is the problem that, not just with the Galaxy, but with all MPVs that have alloys, I think.
You seem to wake up in the morning and you've got this idea for a car that nobody's ever done before. It's going to be slightly different, and I don't know why. It just happens. It's like, it's unexplainable, because you've got this passion to do this thing, and you can't sleep, you can't do anything until you've done it. It's just incredibly silly.
This is the Noble M10, And in a world that's full of shades of grey, this is Technicolor, and I'm off to have some fun. And it's called the M10 because it's the 10th design by Noble Motorsport. It's selling for just under 19 grand in this 1.8 litre form, or from the summer with a 2.5 litre V6 under the bonnet. The M10 is definitely not a shrinking violet. This is a car that screams out to be looked at. Heads turn when you drive past. Cars clear in front of you. And whether you love or you loathe the styling, you have to agree, it certainly makes one hell of an impact. It's quite an amazing vehicle that you've designed and built. What's your history? How did you get into this? Did you just wake up one morning and think, there's nothing out there I fancy, I'm going to go and build a car?
More or less. I was racing at the time, Lotuses, and came to the end of the line racing Lotuses, thought, got to do something, I could do something better. So we started designing our own cars, which went on to win lots of races, and this is where we've ended up, really. It's just a natural progression, you know.
So is there much of the racing experience that you've got in this vehicle?
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, this is what makes the chassis so good, this is what makes it handle so well. It's just experience from racetrack, yeah.
And it's that racing heritage that really shines through once you get behind the wheel of the M10. It's a bit like being in a mini Le Mans car. It doesn't quite have the raw power that you'd need to get through 24 hours on the circuit, but it can still pack a real punch. And just like a Le Mans car, it needs to be handled with a great deal of respect. The steering, however, is light and very, very responsive, and you really feel involved in the whole driving experience. Who's going to buy it? Is this a kind of boy racer? You know, those guys that used to soup up their escorts and tinker with the engines, now they're grown up and they've got a bit of money. Are they the kind of people that this will appeal to, do you think?
It's quite possible. Most of them are solicitors and bank managers now, and they get bored, they want something for the weekends for fun. Yeah, get back to driving experience. It seems to be the major sort of people that want the car, yeah.
What do you think the difference is between the specialist car market that you're involved in and, you know, the big manufacturers? What are the sort of the main points there?
We build cars we want to build. They build cars to suit a mass market. You know, we just build what we want to build, and if people like it, great. If they don't, we change the car. We make a different one. It's that simple, really.
Once you get inside the cabin on a vehicle like this, it's the interior that normally lets it down. But the M10 really stands out as being something quite special. It's extremely well trimmed, done to a very high standard, yet it hasn't lost any of the rawness that is the whole appeal of this vehicle. There's plenty of space inside and the seats are very comfortable, but one thing that they are going to have to change on the production vehicles is how far forward the seat can go, because I'm 5'4" and I can hardly touch the pedals. What do you reckon the M10 is? Would you say it's a kit car, or is it in your view a fledgling production vehicle? You know, where do you position it?
I think really it's going to be more towards a production car, although you will have the option to buy it and build it at home. Most of the people that have inquired about the car so far want a finished car. There's not really a lot of interest in kits.
This is the prototype vehicle, we've got to make that clear. So what will be different in the production vehicles?
Minor things really. The clutch wants a little work on it, as we said. Some of the instrumentation, some of the interior could be improved. And I think by the time the next car comes along, it will be a lot nicer car to drive. I think we'll just change little details and make it a little bit more to suit the lady, you know.
Now, Mr. Noble, I can't understand why you want to conform, but please don't make the production vehicles too refined. The essence of this car is its rawness. It's just perfect for those wannabe racers who love the sounds and the smells of motorsport. If you had a misspent youth and spent hours tinkering with your escort, souping up the engine, and now you've grown up just a little, this is the car for you. convinced that there are enough driving enthusiasts out there to make it possible for Noble to sell the 50 to 100 cars they're aiming to. The only problem I can see the M10 facing is that maybe people haven't heard of the Noble brand before. Well, you have now.
Ford is to invest £36 million at its Southampton plant to refurbish its paint shop facilities. The investment will include an all-new building as well as the upgrade and replacement of the existing paint application equipment, which is used in the production of transits for worldwide sales. Meanwhile, Ford have freshened up the Explorer with a new look tailgate, an enhanced controlled track 4x4 system and new colours, all for no extra cost. Over 2,200 Ford Explorers were sold in the UK last year. And how about this for a mean MPV look? The new Seat Alhambra Sports conversion will give you 18-inch alloys, side skirts and lowered suspension, and will add $7,700 to the list price. For the fourth year running, Audi have recorded record sales, with a year-end total of 35,500 cars, compared with 23,000 just 3 years ago. It proves that Audi's rejuvenated range has struck a chord with the buying public. And with the A6 adding to the sales charge begun by the A3 and A4 models, there's every reason to expect that success to continue. Citroën are joining the Special Offers Club with deals on the Saxo, Zara and Xantia models until the end of March. The Zara 1.4X is just under 11,000. For all Saxo models except the VTS, you can get 2 years free insurance. There's a March the 31st deadline. Next week, Howard Stableford aims for luxury heaven in his new Lexus LS 400. Meanwhile, Mr. Rutherford is spoilt for choice in 4x4 land. The Corando, Terios or the Cherokee, sir? Join us next week on Motor Week.